Welcome to Harlem Capital's More Equity podcast.
I'm Gabby Cazeau, and I'm a principal at Harlem Capital. Today, I'm super excited to welcome our first guest, Miguel Armaza. He's the general partner and co-founder of Gilgamesh Ventures. And so let's jump in to our first episode. Hi, Miguel, and welcome to Harlem Capital's More Equity podcast.
Thank you, Gabby.
We're so excited to have you as part of our Diverse Emerging Managers on the Rise series, and really thrilled for you to be our first guest today. Of course, we know who you are. We've been, become friends over the last year, but would love to introduce you a little bit to our audience. So it'd be great if you could give us a little bit of background on who you are, the things you that did when you went to school, where you grew up, where you worked, and then we can kick off to chatting about the fund that you launched.
Thank you, Gabby. And it's great to see you, although remotely, since last time we hung out, we were both in Brazil, Sao Paulo. So very, very different today. It's cold outside. But yeah, a little bit about myself. I am originally from Bolivia, although I've lived in the US at this point for most of my life. Kind of grew up as the textbook definition of a third culture kid, meaning every 3 to 4 years, my family will pack our bags and move to a different location, different continent. So I was actually born in Italy and then lived in a lot of interesting places, particularly interesting today, including Russia, China, Uruguay. Actually worked in Dublin, Ireland. So I kind of moved around and I was a bit of a nomad for a while. But I call New York home these days. And I came to the US like a lot of international students do for college. I actually started in Houston Community College, had 2 years there, moved to American University. When I was in college, I think that was the first time I tasted entrepreneurship. I got involved with a Facebook page that I launched back in 2009, I think it was. And Facebook had changed its algorithm. I noticed that. I launched a page with funny videos that I would post every day. And this thing exploded and got to almost 3 million followers. And I built a small business around it. And then eventually I was charging, advertising dollars. But Facebook was very new and they realized that they were not getting a cut of it. And so I was shut down eventually by Zuck himself. But it's how I got into this world. I started to experience the power of social media, the power of the internet, particularly since I was doing this from, a tiny dorm room. And also realized that I was a kid, that I probably needed some more experience. And so I went into banking post-graduation. And when I was there, I realized that the technology within banks, inside of banks, was very old, right? I mean, no exaggeration, but in many cases, the technology is from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that is still running to this day. And so I was first at one bank, and then I realized that was the case. But then I realized it wasn't just that bank; it was the whole industry. And so I started to pay attention to fintech, right? Because that was kind of the response to this problem. And that was around the time that Lending Club was getting big, SoFi was getting big. And I remember I came back from an expat role in Dublin, and I had my first savings. First time in my life I had savings. And I started to think about, okay, where do I want to put this money? I definitely want to invest it. It wasn't much. I think it was $10,000. And I was like, should I buy real estate in Latin America? Should I, do this other thing? I had an offer, I remember, to invest in a Five Guys franchise. And then I always surrounded myself with entrepreneurs, and a couple of my friends decided to launch companies. And so that was the answer to my question, to what I had been looking for, right? And so I actually angel invested. And it's funny how things work, because that first investment, it had a huge impact on my career, right? And the years following that, because it gave me access. It gave me visibility into how angel investing works. What are venture capital funds? I had an idea, but I didn't know how they worked. And I stayed close to the companies where I angel invested, and so got to learn how that works, right? And so eventually left banking, went to get my MBA at Wharton, and also got a dual degree with the Lauder Institute. And when I was there, I just doubled down on fintech because I had been angel investing in fintech. And so that led me to do a lot of cool things and that were very, very focused. I started podcasting. I started raising a little bit of money for SPVs that my friends wanted to also invest in. And then that obviously led me to launch Gilgamesh Ventures. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure.
We will. But I do think it's probably like the rare VC today who Mark Zuckerberg himself shut down their early company that they were launching. So that's definitely something to like hang your hat on, which is pretty cool. But it seems like you've seen, the entire ecosystem from trying to launch a company in the early social media days to angel investing yourself, and then now launching the fund. Can you share a little bit more about what led to the actual fund formation itself? Like, what was the catalyst that got you really excited to go and build after seeing all of your angel investments and how they performed? Because I think angel investing is very different from becoming a fund manager. So can you share a little bit more about your thought process there?
Yeah. So it was sometimes when you do something that makes sense, that you like, you find yourself doing more of it, right? And so just to zoom in, the angel investment that I made was in a company called Petal. And actually, funny enough, my co-founder at Gilgamesh is also one of the co-founders of Petal. So we came full circle. But, I got lucky because the company is performing quite well. And I thought to myself, I can do this. This is easy. If my first investment is doing really well, then imagine about the rest. So that encouraged me to do more. But then also, I was surrounding myself with people who were a little bit frustrated with big corporations, right? And I would see them go out and pursue their dreams to start companies. And I would always feel a very strong itch to support them, to do that myself as well. And so there's a little bit of that. There is also the recognition that, at least if you look close enough, you could see that fintech was gonna become very massive, and not just in the U.S. We invest in the Americas, so that includes Canada, the U.S., and all of Latin America. And so if you look closely at Latin America, for example, the opportunity also was fairly obvious, particularly if you looked around 2017, 18, you could see this wave that was starting to grow. And so there was also a very strong desire from my end to be involved, right? And to contribute and to be a part of this in not just as a spectator, right? Because I just have this very strong belief that technology is going to transform the region and it's already doing it. And so I don't want to sit on the sidelines. And then lastly, one thing that's very, very important, my co-founder, Andrew, he built a fintech company and I was on the banking side experiencing, old technology. So it's a little bit also a response to the frustrations that we had in our respective roles, right? I was feeling that there was a huge need to modernize the industry. And also Andrew, he was experiencing some challenges when it comes to building, sometimes when you build a B2C company, you end up discovering a lot of B2B opportunities. And so that's also what happened to him. So you start realizing that just all signs point in a certain direction, right? And so that's why we focus only on fintech, because first of all, it's all we know, but also just we realize that the opportunity is pretty massive. And happy to say that since we got started, which is somewhat over 2 years ago or so, that thesis has only strengthened.
Definitely. And I mean, even just looking at the Gilgamesh Ventures page, you can see, I think, a marquee list of fintech companies, both in Latin America and in the US. So I think you guys have done a really great job of capturing and leaning into that opportunity as you've launched the fund. One thing we didn't quite touch on that I think is also unique in your journey and has a lot of parallels to the Harlem Capital journey has been the big role that media has played in your journey, in our journey as well. But as you get the name of Gilgamesh out, as you connect with fintech leaders, and can would love for the audience to hear a little bit more about the big lessons that you found from launching your podcasts and connecting with industry leaders in that way, and any surprises that came along the way.
Yeah, many surprises. So I started podcasting because it was a great excuse to talk to interesting people. I've always been a huge fan of that kind of content of podcasting. I remember back in the day, I was a huge fan of TED Talks and that kind of thing. And so this is an opportunity to be the person asking the questions, right? And so I tried it once. Actually, my first podcast was in January 2020 back at Wharton. And then I said, okay, I'm probably going to do one a month. Then the pandemic hit and I found myself doing, a lot more than that. So close to 20 a week, 20 a month sometimes. But the biggest lessons are, your guests, oftentimes they are very, very successful people who, when you get to know them, they are, they're not Einstein level smart, right? They're special, but they're special in other ways. I think the biggest commonality is that they're courageous, right? They dare to do what others don't. And sometimes that's all it takes, right? You don't need to be the smartest in the room, but you need to be courageous. And also you need to be able to work very hard. One observation has been, I've interviewed sometimes Series A, Series B founders, but most of the time it's pretty late stage or even public company CEOs. And the most successful ones tend to be the ones who pay the most attention when they're talking to you. And they're the most attentive, because I think that at that point they've learned that any piece of content from you that's out there can land in anyone's computer and anyone's phone. So you never know who's watching. And oftentimes whenever I have a more younger entrepreneur, more early stage, I've had times where they're distracted and they're multitasking. That has never happened to me with someone who's ultra successful. So that's been interesting. And then when it comes to the connection with venture capital investing, I don't know exactly how much is the overlap in terms of percentage, but it's a huge percentage. So there's a lot of overlap between podcasting and investing. At the end of the day, you have to be curious. You have to be asking the right questions. You have to be researching the newest trend, a certain company. So you have to be able to quickly just go deep and quickly be able to ask interesting questions that will give you the answers that you're looking for. And so two big surprises. On one end, when I started raising, I initially wasn't sharing it with some of my guests, because before and after you record, you usually have a conversation. Sometimes you meet in person. And so I was pretty reserved. And then I remember there was a guest who actually asked me, like, hey, Miguel, this is very interesting, but are you only podcasting or what else are you doing? And so I told him, and he became one of our biggest LPs. And so I realized, oh, wow, I probably should be sharing it with more people organically. I hate to be pushy, but I did start to share, and, about 20 of our LPs were, I met them because they were podcast guests, right? So that was an amazing result. And then on the other end, I think even more exciting discovery was the engagement from the audience. So I'm very fortunate that we have a pretty big subscriber base. And when I'm recording, whoever the people that I have in mind are early stage founders, right? Because there are a lot of them listening, and then when they tune in, they're trying to learn from late stage entrepreneurs. And so what happened is many of them end up reaching out. And if you look at our portfolio, about 30% of our companies came from we sourced them, we found them because the CEO or one of the co-founders reached out to me because they were a listener of the podcast or some variation of that. So it's had an amazing effect, and it allows us to be in thousands of places at the same time. And so it's extremely complementary, but I want to be very, very clear. If you do it for sourcing or if you do it to find LPs, I think you're going to be miserable because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I put out an episode a week, and you just need to do it because you enjoy it and because you like it. Like that phrase says, enjoy the process. And
gotta love the process for this one.
Oh, you gotta love it.
Yeah.
I've done about close to 200 interviews. I think by interview 5 or 10, if you like it or not.
That's fair. Oh man. Well, I love the lessons. A few that stood out to me that I'd love to recap was, the first is that when you're getting a chance to talk to all these people, it's their courage that stands out. They may not, I'm sure they're incredibly smart, talented, et cetera, but it's really doing the thing that others won't that sets them apart, which I think was really interesting. And I think in terms of media and presence and scale, that it lets you be in 1,000 places at once, which helps expand your brand so that when you get in the room with people, when you're pitching and fundraising, it makes it that much easier. So I love that lesson. I'd love to transition a little bit to talking a little bit more about that fundraising journey. I think that can be one of the biggest black boxes and unknowns for new investors in VC already, or even emerging fund managers or people who want to be fund managers. So can you share a little bit more about how much knowledge you had about fundraising itself before you started that? And now that you've been through it, what is it actually like?
Yeah. So I had never raised money except for maybe some charity event, prior to VC. But I did not start raising uniquely solely for a fund, right? I started raising for SPV, single deal SPVs. And what that means is, there was a specific company where, we would get an allocation, and then I would go out to people I knew, presented the opportunity, and then got commitments. That is probably an easier way to start, because you, at the end of the day, you are selling a little bit your ability to find good companies, but mostly you're selling the company, right? And because every dollar that you raise is going to go specifically to that company. So we did a few of those, a few SPVs, and so that was my entry point. It proved to me a couple things. It proved to me that some people in my network could invest, had the ability and the willingness. and then also it proved to me that, I could do this, right? At least to some extent. Once we started raising, it's one of those things that you're right. There's barely any classes and a few books, but not many on fundraising specifically for a fund. But that's also because I think it's very hard to teach, right? You have to do it. And I talked to a very experienced, very large asset manager who was telling me, and this person has raised billions of dollars, and he was telling me, listen, you either enjoy it or you hate it, right? And you better enjoy it because you're going to have to do a lot of it. And fortunately, I enjoyed it because it forces you to have a lot of conversations, oftentimes with interesting people, right? And then when things go well, these interesting people end up backing you and investing in you. So there's no better feeling than that, right? And you, for fund one, you got to start with, imagine a lot of circles, right? And concentric circles, and you got to start in the middle, with your closest network. So you start with maybe some friends that have the ability to invest, former colleagues, people in your network. If you're fortunate to have a family member that can invest, you should definitely hit them up. And then you go from there, right? And it's it can be a little bit scary if that's why you need to really, really believe in yourself. I remember we had closed about $3 million, at the beginning of the process. And while that was great, it was nowhere near our target. And I just remember thinking, I have no idea where the rest is going to come from. I had literally no idea. But I was okay with that because I was pretty confident that we were going to figure it out, right? You turn every stone, you knock on every door. And also one thing that I kind of created for myself was a sort of like a checklist that helped me reduce the number of conversations and increase our hit rate. And I got inspiration from another VC who told me something along the lines and along these lines, and I adjusted it for myself. But it's basically, you gotta find, first of all, you gotta understand that you cannot convince anyone of anything, right? So you gotta be able to tell them a story that aligns with what they want. And then what do they want? What are they comfortable with, right? So there's 4 things that I would think about before every call. Number one, are they comfortable investing in venture capital in the asset class? It's a obscure asset class for most people, right? So they need to be able to understand it. Number 2, are they comfortable investing in fintech? That's what we're selling. We're selling a portfolio that's going to be full of fintech companies. So people have to be comfortable with that. Then, a big chunk of our portfolio is in Latin America. So are they comfortable investing in Latin America? Not everyone is, right? And finally, they got to be comfortable investing with us, right? That's because we're going to be steering the ship. So before any call, and sometimes this will take me 5 seconds, sometimes it would take me longer, but before every call, I would try to make sure that 2 of those were already ticked off, so the 2 of those were already met. Because then, we would only be talking about the remaining 2, right? And then I just had to convince these people to take the leap on 2 out of this 4. But if you are talking to someone who's never invested in venture capital, who doesn't know what fintech is, who hates emerging markets and doesn't know me, it's an uphill battle, and you're never going to win it, or almost never. And so that helped us a lot.
Amazing. It's like you just unlocked the keys to a successful fundraise, and create that checklist so you can narrow your funnel, because you're really only looking for this few people for whom all 4 of those questions align, and the answer is yes. And then they make up your overall LP base, which is really exciting. I guess I'm curious. So you mentioned that you would always ask or make sure at least 2 of those questions were true. Maybe it's, are they comfortable investing in VC, and then fintech? Do you have to get anyone over the line about investing in Latin America? And then how did you then also get them to that last question, if they didn't know you first, to get them comfortable investing in you and then the team at Gilgamesh?
Yeah. So there's a lot of historical misconceptions about Latin America that, a lot of people are starting to understand the potential of it. And then, the reality is that there are risks in Latin America or any emerging market. And those risks are not going to go away, right? So you have to be comfortable with that. But also you have to understand that it's because of these risks, not despite, but because of the risks, that the opportunity is so big, right? And so, yes, we had a few people. In fact, we have several people in the portfolio, several investors and our, as part of our LPs, I mean, who have never invested in Latin America before. And we are their entry point to investing in the region. And especially I'm talking about our US-based LPs. But guess what? If they understand the power of venture capital, if they understand the power of fintech, and they're seeing its transformative effect in the US and Europe, and also if they trust us, then they know that we are probably going to make the best choices to find transformative companies in Latin America. And so that's actually a point of pride for me, that we are bringing US dollars from US investors to invest in Latin America for the first time. And, this is not charity. We're definitely looking for extraordinary returns, but at the same time, it has a very positive impact. And when it comes to getting investors who don't know us to invest in us, it's very hard when you're going cold. And I don't think we did it almost a single time. It was always through referrals, right? Either referrals of some of our LPs, or maybe some people who couldn't invest for one of many reasons, but they had someone in their network that was a good fit, right? The ones that were just pure cold leads is maybe people who saw us on social media, on LinkedIn especially, maybe saw one of my interviews, maybe knew about Andrew as a founder of Petal. So I don't think we had a single pure cold lead. It was always through referrals of people that we trusted, people that knew us very well. And then, you build a relationship.
And I think that actually speaks to something that is persistent that I see across the VC tech and LP sort of like funding landscape, is that everything is so network driven and relationship driven. And so it speaks well to the fact that you were able to build a lot of those connections that led to LPs through, your previous work. But also I think some of the challenges that diverse emerging managers might find because they don't have those existing networks and aren't able to perhaps navigate that landscape in that way. So it's really interesting. So I want to switch gears a little bit to talking about building the fund. So there's the idea behind it. You started with SVPs as that early MVP, then raising the fund, creating the fund strategy, which for you is investing in fintech, investing across the Americas. And I think the next important steps are then building the fund itself. One of the most important things to that is who you choose to partner with as you build that institution. And you've mentioned your co-founder or co-founding partner a little bit. Can you share a little bit more about what brought you all together and how your skills and experiences balance each other out as you build the incredible fund?
Yeah. So we met through a common friend who had gone to high school with me, and then had gone to college with Andrew. It's a very long story, and how he ended up specifically in that university, which is the University of Arkansas. But and then we all moved to New York at the same time. And it's no secret that one of your most important decisions is who you co-found a company with. And that's true for any type of company, a fund, a fintech company, or anything in between. And so we're fortunate to know each other for a long time, right? Over a decade. And by the time I angel invested in his company, in Petal, we already knew each other quite well, right? But maybe that forced us to start talking more about work-related things or about fintech, right? And then just that evolved from me making an angel investment to then hearing about a second opportunity and telling Andrew about it, or him hearing about a company that one of his VCs was investing in and then telling me about it. And so we started co-investing as angels. And so it was very, very natural, very organic. And then we realized, okay, there's an opportunity here to start doing SPVs. When it comes to complementary skill sets, that is absolutely crucial, right? You won't see Andrew doing a lot of podcast interviews, right? He might be on the guest side, but not on the host side, and so he brings the founder empathy, the experience of having raised multiple rounds, having dealt with co-founders, having hired and fired employees, and just anything that comes from building a company. And also he's a lawyer, whereas on my end, I spent many years in banking. I had the experience of building the media platform, right? So we bring very different points of view, but at the same time, you gotta be able to understand each other and work together closely, because this is an intense job. It's a fast-paced job, and you're gonna make mistakes. Also, you're gonna eventually pass on opportunities that one of us wanted to invest in and the other one didn't, right? But even if that company becomes a unicorn in the future, you can't hold it against each other. That is a recipe for failure. And so you got to be able to look past that. That's also crucial. And by the way, I'll be remiss if I did not mention that we're now a team of 3.
That's
actually.
true.
And so we hired Paula Yu. We've also known her for a very long time, close to a decade. And she joined us a couple of weeks ago, and she's already the third pillar of the company. And I don't understand how we worked without her before.
I love it. And I guess it speaks to the some of the challenges or the benefits, one, of starting to expand the team, because as early emerging managers, you're raising and investing and supporting founders and kind of doing a little bit of everything. So I guess I'm curious, now that you're a strong team of 3, I guess, how do you balance across all 3 of you all of those different the front end and back end work of raising and launching the fund?
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit before I go a little bit deeper. So I don't think most people realize the amount of operational work and non-glamorous daily activities that come with starting a fund or any company. So you have to embrace that. You just have to accept it. You have to do it. You have to be able to roll up your sleeves, and nothing, absolutely nothing is, beyond you. So you have to do it. Also, it's going to be chaotic, because just you're getting so much volume of stuff, right? Not just deal flow, but everything that has to be done. It's going to be chaotic. And you have to also be comfortable with the fact that, you're never going to be able to go very deep with a single company unless you switch careers and join one of your portfolio companies, which happens. But that's just a reality. And some people hate that. That's why I think VCs for very few people, because you're just doing a little bit of a lot, right? Also, the chase never stops. Even if you think you found the most amazing company, the next day after you sign and after everyone high fives and hugs, you got to go find the next one, right? So it's very intense. If you do your job well, right? And also one last thing I'll say about that is the ironic part is that the better you are at your job, the harder it becomes. And what I mean by that is when we got started, our first investment was this company called Zeppelin, and they're an amazing company. And I remember when we talked to them over 2 years ago, they were probably the only amazing company we talked to that week, or maybe even in those couple weeks. So it was an obvious decision. It's like if there's any company we have to invest in out of the ones that we've talked to recently, it's that one. It's very, very obvious. Today, yes, we have more experience seeing great companies, but at the same time, we're getting a lot of deal flow. We're getting a lot of companies, a lot of great founding teams in the same week, sometimes multiple a day. And so how do you make a decision, right? With angel investing, you can invest in as many companies as you can afford to. With VC investing, you can only pick one or two, right? And our pace is that we try to invest one a month. And so you have to say no to a lot of great companies. So those are the things that you're always doing and you're blocking and tackling every day. And so we try to kind of divide some of the to-dos amongst each other, and we all have our strengths, right? And that's important. And we're still a small team that we just have a group chat, and we can easily coordinate. But there's a lot of stuff that has to be done, especially if you're building something that you want it to last, right? And for us, we want to grow in a very smart way by setting a strong foundation. And so anything we do, we want to make sure it's a smart choice and it's gonna help us do more in the future.
Makes a ton of sense. And I love your point that the better you get at the job, the harder it gets, because you're right. The chase does never stop. And you're always looking for, okay, what is the next company? What is the next emerging space that we can invest in? And also, how do I improve as an investor, right? Because as you get better at picking companies and winning companies, then you continue to reframe what you think a great founder looks like. And earlier in the conversation, you mentioned some of the themes and frameworks of success that you've seen through the people you've interviewed in the podcast. And so I'm curious to kind of flip that question or conversation. As an investor, are there 2 to 3 traits that you consistently start to see across the top and most successful founders? And would love if there are any examples in your current portfolio that you can speak to about why they stuck out to you to invest in, but also how that resonates or how that aligns with what you think a successful founder looks like.
Yeah, and I think the points are not going to be surprising to anyone, but there's certainly some commonalities, right, amongst the absolute best. So first of all, it's storytelling, right, and that also ties back to raising a fund, right? It's all storytelling, and so if you are a great, ambitious storyteller, you are going to be able to recruit the best. Because as a founder of even if you close a seed round that's $3, $4, $5 million, the best people, the best talent, that's not going to be enough to convince them to join a company. Okay, you're well capitalized, so what? So you're gonna have to be able to sell your vision, your dream, and get them as excited as you are, right? With a lot less equity, right? And you're gonna have to convince them to probably leave a well-paying job or leave the startup where they're at, where maybe they haven't fully vested. And so that's number one. If you are a great storyteller, you're going to be able to get the best talent. That connects to fundraising, right? With fundraising, it's the same thing. You're recruiting your investors, right? And so the best investors are looking for the best people, and they're only going to see this if these people are actually selling in a very passionate way. Of course, size of the market matters, motivation, why they're doing it matters. Of course. But you're going to have to be extremely passionate and articulate and just a great storyteller. So mediocrity just doesn't cut it. Also, it's having a a clear vision, right? Some of the best companies that you talk to, and I understand pivots happen very often, but also oftentimes you talk to someone and they articulate a vision very early on, and then you look back, 2 years later, and they're building that vision, right? How they get there is going to have a lot of twists and turns, but just like having the wherewithal to really pursue that vision and convince everyone to join you is just so crucial, right? And then also they have an ability to, while keeping that long-term vision, also be able to go very deep into the details, right? And be able, because the way you're going to get to that 10-year vision is by executing today, right? And so that is just crucial, right? That you're going to be able to execute and pursue at the very nitty-gritty what needs to happen for your company to move forward.
Fantastic. And it's so great to hear how you're thinking about and approaching it in terms of like what those traits look like, being able to tell a great story, sell a strong vision. I think to your point, it's true for founders and it's true for fund managers who constantly need to be pitching and storytelling and telling the vision of not where just their fund is today or the market they're investing today, but where it'll be 10 years from now when those returns start really flowing for LPs. So that's super exciting. And part of why we wanted to launch this series was to share with more people the stories and journeys of other diverse managers and how they think, their experiences fundraising. At Harlem Capital, we just care about supporting diversity and elevating stories of diverse founders, investors, operators, and managers across the ecosystem. And so I, from that lens, would love to hear you share a little bit about your experience as a diverse emerging manager. There aren't very many. Of course, we see more coming through the ecosystem, which is great. But I'm curious, is it what you expected? And how do you see the VC ecosystem continuing to evolve in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah. So on one end, it's a point of pride for sure. You just have to look at the numbers. I was reading not long ago, I think it was in Forbes. It's only 2% of venture capitalists that are Latinos, right? So when you think about it, yeah, it's a small minority, and then it's not representative of the wider population out there. So that actually kind of forces you, at least personally, puts pressure to do a good job, right? Because if you screw it up, you screw it up for everyone, right? So, and also on our end, I'm not only a Latino emerging manager, but also we're investing in Latin America, and that's also something that not a lot of people are doing. On the other end, and I want to be very honest, and I'm probably going to contradict myself a little bit, I don't think about it that much, right? It's the only reality I know. It's also unfortunately not going to change overnight, right? So the best thing that I can do is to focus, to do really like a fucking great job, right? To hopefully empower others along the way, open doors for other people. And also like being in a diverse environment is all I know, right? I grew up, in very diverse teams where my core group of 5 friends, we're all from 5 different countries across 4 continents. So it's all I know, right? And so that's why I also don't think about it that much. But I understand the importance, and obviously I try to stay involved with different groups, right? To try to mentor the next generation, or even this sharing my story, can hopefully help other people. And, funny, happy to say that we are also a very diverse team. You have a Latino, Paula, who's Korean American, and Andrew. So it's it's the kind of culture we're building. But I'm not doing it because we have to be diverse or anything like that. No, it's because it's just the best possible choice, right? And also, like I said, it's all I know.
I know your story is inspiring others to either to pursue their own dreams, right? Whatever that might be in whatever space it may be. And I think your point that resonates a lot with me personally is also that like, this is all you know. And this is how we see the world and our experiences. And, being able to just do great work where we are and, push the ecosystem forward is something that's really exciting. So thanks for sharing. And then now I would love to end with some quick rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what's a book or podcast that you think everybody should be listening to or reading that has been impactful for you?
I want to look at my book stack.
I love it.
Right now. But, one that comes to mind I'll give you two. One that comes to mind for fintech is the story about PayPal. The most recent book is called The Founders, written by Jimmy Sonny. I actually had him on the podcast. And for fintech builders, not just founders, but anyone building a fintech company, it's an inspiring book. And these people had the same challenges the fintech founders are having today, just 25 years ago. So that one I liked. And I just started reading not long ago a book about New York. So I'm a huge fan of New York City. It's home for me. I've been here for over a decade. And it's a resilient city. I've been in New York during some of its lows and some of its highs, right? And so there's this book called The Big Comeback, I think is what it's called, or The Great Comeback. And it's called Greater Than Ever. And then the tagline is The Big Comeback. Greater Than Ever. And so it's a great book about New York. And what I love about it is, some of the great results that we're seeing today in New York City, the planning got started 3 decades ago. So it's also inspiring for anyone building anything, company or a city or anything. Your vision has to be a very long-term vision. That's only great things are only achieved in decades, not in months. And so it's a very inspiring book for anyone that likes New York City.
I love it. And then the last question, if you weren't a VC, what would you be doing? The last question, if you weren't a VC right now or launching a fund, where would you be? What would you be doing? Where would we find Miguel?
I have said this before. I know exactly what I would be doing. I would take Anthony Bourdain's old job and just taste the best food around the world while traveling and meeting new people and having the most interesting conversations possible.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to borrow that one. I love the show, and Stanley Tucci has been like the next sort of best thing, I think, that's popped up sort of since then.
Yeah. I'm still sad about Anthony Bourdain, but amazing gift to the world.
Absolutely. Well, Miguel, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and story on our podcast. Super excited to have you, and congrats again on everything you've built with Gilgamesh so far.
Thank you, Gabby, and thanks for doing this, and thanks also for being an inspiration for many people.
Appreciate it.